The Solo Coach Podcast.
So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Solo Coach Podcast. This is the first interview of the podcast, and I am delighted to welcome Sjirk Ament to the show. Now, I met Sjirk back in March 2023 in New Zealand. We met in Wellington and made friends there, and then we ended up going over from the North Island of New Zealand to the South Island on the ferry, the Inter-Islander, and we went down to from Picton to Nelson and then to the Abel Tasman National Park, where we did some kayaking together and some walking together. And then we said goodbye and thought we may never meet again. And then, as we were just discussing before the podcast recording started, we actually had a reunion then. A few days later in a place called Greymouth on the west coast of New Zealand. And ever since then, we've not met in person ever since 2023, but we've been keeping in touch throughout the remainder of our travels, as we were both solo traveling for quite a long time. And then we've had some regular calls, as Sjirk is based in the Netherlands, and I'm obviously based in the UK. And I think in all the time I've known him, I've never once pronounced his name wrong. But as the sign of a true friend, he's let me off, and he's never once picked me up on it. So I'll let you introduce yourself with the true pronunciation of your name. And I think just to get us started, could you tell us how long you travelled for, and it's kind of a bit of an overview of where you went?
Yeah, so my travels started, let's see, end of 2022. Just to give a bit of context, I used to study psychology for 6 years. And when I got my master's degree, I was like, I could start with a job right now, but this is the right time, like between studies and job, to start traveling, see something of the world, and just kind of have a go and see where it ends. So my aim was to do at least 3 months and see how long it would take. So I ended up actually staying in New Zealand for 8 months, then spent about 2.5 months in Australia and another 2 months in Southeast Asia. Um, and then it was exactly 365 days after I had left. I came back to the Netherlands and started to build life here, back at the place where I came from.
Thanks, man. Thanks for that whistle stop tour, that overview of your travels. So before we get into kind of what you did on your travels and coming home, I'd love to zoom into that bit before you went traveling. How did you know that you wanted to go traveling, and kind of what was going through your head at the time that you were making that decision about whether to go traveling or not?
So it kind of started off just before I went studying, because when I finished high school, I didn't exactly know where to go to university or to go at university at all. So I took a gap year, which was not that common back then. And I kind of got encouraged a bit to at least spend a bit of time abroad. So I ended up spending 2 months abroad in Thailand when I was 17, actually. And honestly, I never expected to do that before I actually booked it. It never crossed my mind. I actually read back old assignments, like future assignments about my future when I was in high school. And it was all about, I'll just get a wife and have children and find a job in like right here nearby, and that will be a great life. And then I found out and then I thought, well, this is actually the best time probably to go abroad and experience that. And I was really scared. Obviously, I was scared. I was 17 and went abroad alone for the first time, but I was in a project where you get guidance from adults, which I wasn't myself back then. And I felt I didn't really miss all the hobbies that I had that much. I was really into playing football and stuff, and I felt, well, this experience is something someone can never take from me. And that experience, the fact that you experience something that someone never can take back from you, and that is worth the sacrifice of leaving your daily life behind. From that moment on, I knew I wanted to travel after my studies. And I've been quite persistent in that ever since. So as soon as I went to university, I said, when I'm finished, I'm going to New Zealand. That was out of the question. Seemed to me for some reason like the most beautiful place in the world. So that's always been out of the question, no matter what my hobbies were and how much I was attached to people around me, friends, family, and stuff. That was a thing that always was set in my mind. So that's kind of it.
Thanks, man. So Thailand planted the seed for you of, I love this. It sounds like you faced into your fears and
Oh, yes. I've cried hard when I was 17 and left everything I knew behind.
really. And
Yeah, of
what
course.
was it
Even
like
though I
there
wasn't
being for the
safe
first
hand.
time?
Yeah, I wasn't safe hands in Thailand. It was organized by a Western country. Everything was arranged quite properly, but it's freaking scary for a first time, especially at that age.
It's so far away to go just on your
Oh,
own.
it's
Were you with some
absolutely.
friends or like in a, say, an organized group?
Oh, I was in an organized group, but I didn't know anyone. So
Oh, okay.
I went there solo, met people on the way. Um, and then I figured out it was not as scary as I thought it would be, you know?
What what were you most scared of happening? Like what was your worst fear?
So you mean when I was 17, right?
Yeah, when you went for that very first time.
Well, it was the first time I went on a holiday without anyone else. I mostly went on holiday with my parents or with friends a few times. It was the first time out of Europe. I had to save my own ass completely. Um, and well, all those things combined make it like scarier. It was the first time out of EU for me as well. So first time you need to deal with a visa, you need to actually be allowed to get into a country, stuff like that. It's quite scary. And as soon as I got at the passport control, I didn't know what my address was where I would stay, so they didn't let me in at first because I didn't fill it in, which made it even scarier straight away. um, but managed, and then you feel like, oh, whatever happens, everything will be okay at some point. You'll save your own ass in a way.
So it sounds like you learned some lessons and maybe made a few mistakes on that very first time. And
Absolutely.
did you learn from them?
I absolutely learned from them a lot. Um, um, but I have to say, after I got back, it did motivate me a lot to go backpacking someday again, which I did 6 years later, 7 years later. Um, but all the time in between was quite standard, I didn't have, I just did my studies. I had the same hobbies as I had before I left, same friends as I had before I left. So not that much changed in my daily life. It was more in my head.
Hmm.
Um, which is quite interesting but I I'm happy that Thailand at least planted the seed, as you say, to motivate me to go traveling someday again afterwards.
So thank you so much. So when you then went to go traveling, like on your second solo adventure, sort of to New Zealand, um, given what you learnt from Thailand, were you still nervous about it, or kind of more relaxed, knowing what to expect, or yeah, what was it
Um, I was really relaxed actually. First time I was quite scared in Thailand, but it was 7 years later. I was 24 by that point, so obviously age matters as well. You grow more confident over time and stuff. I actually wasn't scared at all. I just excited. I kind of knew how things would go. I knew that I would make friends along the way because I've experienced it when I was 17. And I was like, if I can make friends at 17 in another country, I can definitely do that at 24. So, and I actually really liked the fact that you didn't know what was going to come. You know you're going on an adventure, but you have no clue where it's going to end. You have no clue where you end up. You have no clue what friends you'll make. And that actually made me quite excited. So yeah, not I really wasn't scared the second time at all, actually.
Okay, and what was running through your head when? Because I recall it. What was running through your head when you were sat on the plane, literally about to take off to leave the Netherlands and go all the way to the other side of the world to New Zealand?
Um, it really felt like um a new chapter was about to start, and I had no clue where and when that chapter was gonna end. And that was well, that might have been a bit scary, but not that I felt very scared, but more like, wow, where's this gonna end, man? What's gonna happen right now? We'll see. And was just looking out of the window, the plane takes off, and like, okay, there we go. I have no clue whenever I see these European lands again. It's quite a weird feeling if you don't have a set plan. So, and I must say, before I went to New Zealand, I went to Spain for a week to visit my best friend who was living there at the time. So that was a really nice, heartwarming start to, well, kind of set it off. Um, but I remember straight away getting into a talk with an old lady in the first plane, a British lady who was really nervous, and uh, I was already like, I felt quite good to be able to have like these little small talks with people I didn't know, which you don't do at home as much. And then in the second plane, I had another small talk with a Malaysian guy, and well, you kind of just bond over just a small flight, which is quite nice, I think. Um, so those little things already make me excited. Like, if this can happen on a plane, what will happen in a hostel? What will happen in wherever I end up? You know?
Exactly. So the journey, I guess, began before you even landed in New Zealand, or like before you even
Absolutely.
arrived in Spain. It straight away you were in that like the traveler mindset of meet everyone, have interesting conversations, and
Yeah.
see
and
where it
then
goes.
and then already heartwarming moments start as well. Like the old lady I met in the first plane, she was really scared. She had never flown before, not very often, and she was quite old. And she said, "Oh, our conversations really helped me pull through this flight because I didn't have to think about the flights all the time, but just about our conversation. So thank you for that." And she gave me a little book that she had and didn't need anymore, and that's already quite a nice start of your whole trip.
Yeah, yeah, I had a few similar experiences. I'm curious as to how prepared were you, or how prepared did you feel for the journey you were about to embark on, and how much did you know about it? Did you know like how long you'd be going for, and roughly where you'd be going, and kind of how much had you planned for?
So I didn't plan that much. I just made sure I knew the things that I should know, like, your visa stuff. That's the stuff that you should know, because otherwise you won't even be able to enter the country. So you need to be sure to have that stuff ready, and to know what's, especially like to New Zealand and Australia, what can you take into the country. You can't just take everything into the country. I can even recall someone being treated like a criminal because she had a banana in her suitcase. So that's stuff you need to kind of watch out for. um as in terms of travel plans, not too much. I did Google for a few highlights. I did buy Lonely Planet, but in hindsight, I shouldn't have needed it. I got rid of my Lonely Planet quite quickly because I figured out that the best advice is that you get from your fellow travelers and not from Google. Um, and because of previous experiences, I kind of knew what to bring. Um, and I tried not to pack too much because, well, the stuff that you didn't pack, you can always buy it. And the stuff that you overpack, you need to carry it with you for the rest of your trip or get rid of it in an op shop or something. So, yeah, I tried to prepare the things that needed to be prepared, but also let life decide whatever was going to happen for all the open ends.
I like what you said, particularly about the Lonely Planet guide. I think mine lasted about 8 weeks in New Zealand, and then I realized I'm carrying around this lead weight. And in the first week, I'd used it every day, and then after the
Yeah.
second week, probably used it maybe twice. And
Yeah.
you just resort to. I just found out people from information from people in hostels, and the
Right.
hostels themselves were fantastic, and it was just so up to date and fresh.
Yeah. And it also, um, well, you get more to the hidden gems as well, which is way more fun than doing all the top 10 lists that you find on Google. I've done a few things that are on the top of any New Zealand Google list. I've skipped those and then did something that people don't know about. And I was one of the one or two or three guests in that whole place, which was way more fun than going to the places that hundreds of people visit every day. Um, so I think that's a much better way of traveling for me, at least. Some people might love to do more the strict, the followed path, but I prefer to do the path less followed, as you call it.
Exactly, and that's why you're on the show, the first guest. Um, so you had this sort of expectation about New Zealand that, you were going to make friends and it was going to be just like your previous solo travels and that you'd be okay. But, how did the reality match that? Was New Zealand exactly like you were expecting it would be, or was it different in some ways, better or worse?
Overall was definitely better than I expected. My expectations were high, but I wouldn't have thought, and that's not just the country, but the whole experience in general. I wouldn't have thought that it would have such a lasting impact on me as it does. Like I genuinely feel in love with the country, like whenever I see things on TV still here in the Netherlands about the country, or I see news popping up about it, it still makes my heart beat a little bit faster because of that great experience that it was. Um, Obviously, some things aren't what you expect in a negative way, like, well, public transport is not great, and some of those practical things, it's not cheap, those kinds of things. Um, but what really enjoyed the kinds of people that were traveling the country. They felt like my kind of people more than the other countries that I visited. The nature is amazing, as you might agree, I guess.
Absolutely.
Um, and I think what really opened extra doors for me and made it like given an extra dimension was the fact that I bought my own car, which made me choose wherever I wanted to go at any point, at any time of the day. Um, and that really gave it an extra dimension, and really was the months that I had my own car were definitely the highlights. Um, but that was also quite a big step to take because well, it didn't feel like normal to be owner of a car in another country, and you need to fix your insurance, you need to make sure that you're the actual owner of the car. It's not done in 2 seconds. You need to, well, arrange some stuff about it.
Kind of follow
um
the right process. You
yeah.
said there about that, we're literally talking about the highlights of the journey, but I'm curious as well as to what were some of the obstacles and challenges that you faced on the journey.
I think one of the biggest, definitely the hardest time was the month after I left New Zealand, because I went to Australia on after New Zealand, and that whole country was just too overwhelming for me at that point, like mentally and physically. Uh, I went from Auckland to Melbourne, and Melbourne's already got just as many people living there as the whole of New Zealand, 5 million. Um, that was way too overwhelming for me. Plus the fact that I loved everything about New Zealand and I didn't see it back that much in Australia by that point. We went to Tasmania where it was way too cold for me to handle at that point. It was winter there and we had a camper. Um, and I was just missing the vibe that made me feel home there.
Mm.
And then also my body had to struggle with the temperature and stuff. And all those things combined just made me feel so exhausted mentally and physically. That my friends from I was traveling with two friends from home by that point, that they actually discussed to bring me home with them after our trip. Um, so that I should go home earlier probably. Um, so yeah, that was mentally a really tough time. Some songs might have made me emotional by that point straight away. If it gave me a memory of New Zealand and I would hear a song, I could start crying straight away. And I never do that kind of stuff, but at that time I did, and that was really weird to experience. It was not a good experience, but I'm happy it happened.
You're happy it happened. How
Oh,
so?
absolutely.
How so?
Um, well, it you get to know yourself better. You get to know your body better. You get to know what signals of your body you should take seriously, and you should take everything seriously. But now I can feel some signals better and know how to cope with it. And I know how to cope with stress better. Because what really helped for me was at one point just sit down, because we were about to have a 10-hour bus trip. And I just wrote everything down that was on my mind. And I think I wrote 10 pages in the worst handwriting I've ever had. You can see the stress in the handwriting. Um, but it did help. Like, it didn't fix my problem straight away, but it did help. And because of that, I actually started journaling weekly and consistently since I've been back. So that's been a really good lesson, and it is uncomfortable to have a lot on your mind and write it down. It's really weird, especially if you're not used to it. Um, but it's helped me cope with it, and it's helped me coping with stress a lot better ever since.
Hmm. What else? And how else did you get through that? Clearly, that was a big sort of stumbling block for you, a big obstacle while you were there. I think you mentioned in Tasmania, sort of grieving the loss of New Zealand, and you were there with your friends and thinking about maybe pulling the plug on your travels and going home. Kind of what else? What kept you going? What stopped you from kind of giving in to that temptation to go home?
Um, well, I think I kind of set some point in time, like this should be kind of a decision point. Like, if I don't feel better after this amount of time, it's better to go home. If I do feel better, or at least feel a bit better, I think can keep going. Um, and talking about it helps as well. So I'm happy I traveled with two good or best friends at that point. So that helps. And they really gave me the space to do my own thing. I didn't need to join them for everything. So that really helps. And I think at some point, especially after I started to write stuff down and started to slow down, um, it was easier to keep going. So just say to people around you, like, I'm going this far, but no further. So if people want to do 5 things a day and you can only handle 2 things, stick with your 2 things and don't try to please everyone else, because, well, it will pull you down at some point.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that, man. And that kept you going. The combination, so no one single fix was the answer, but the combination of those things. And
Yeah, but
shout out to those two friends if they're listening as well.
absolutely. But also, yeah, I think the main thing was as well, just try to stick to your own plan, what's best for you. Like, and obviously that doesn't always work. You kind of want to, well, fit in someone else's plan as well. But especially if you don't feel good, um, try to see what's best for you. So what we did actually by some point was we split up, because the other guys wanted to see as much of Australia in a short time as possible, and I wasn't so much on the schedule. So I decided to go to the beach for a week and just chill on the beach and have a swim and have some walks, and that was it. Um,
Nice.
and that really helped me through that tough time, kind of reset my mind.
Sounds like it gave you some time and space just to reflect. Literally,
Yes.
time out of traveling, just stay in one place kind of
Yes,
get your head and yourself back in order, recharge the
absolutely.
batteries.
Yeah.
And where did you go from there?
So afterwards we met up again, um, which was nice, but I still felt exhausted quite quickly. Like I prefer to have an energy bar that lasts for the whole day. But whereas first my energy bar would be empty like around noon. By then it would probably be my energy bar would be empty around like 6, 7 p.m. Um, so I still felt there was a way to go. So what I ended up doing was working in a hostel for a short period of time when my friends left. So I would be in the same place for a while and well, feel structured, feel a bit of structure, having a time schedule, waking up at the same time every morning, doing some work in the morning, and then chill a bit in the afternoon. Um, that that gave a bit more structure in my head as well. And
Mhm.
then I felt enough energy to go to Asia for 2 months.
That where it was full of a load of different challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I remember when traveling, there's this elusive thing people refer to as travel burnout. And for someone who's never traveled, it's like, what? So you're on holiday every day. How can you possibly get burnt out? But what you said there about just craving that stability and needing to just be in one place for a while and build
Yeah.
that community around you kind of felt like a solution for you. I recall being in a similar position and getting tired of the hostel life, and then kind of making myself a little home in Langkawi in a little tiny little
Oh,
hotel.
yeah. I remember you saying that.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I stayed in Langkawi for 6 weeks and became sort of people still text me now that have lived there.
Awesome.
I became part of that community, and that to me it recharged my batteries at a time when I was really struggling just from the constant change, the unexpected of every single day, and moving from hostel to hostel, making friends, losing friends, making friends, losing friends as you meet people,
Yeah.
have a great time together, and then you naturally go your separate ways. It's lots of fleeting relationships, and for me, I got quite drained by that. So
Yes.
that just gave me the opportunity to see the same people consistently for about 6 weeks, build
Yeah.
really strong relationships, and then when I was back up to speed and fully recharged. And in some ways, I then craved getting back on the road again and moving.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
moved to
completely agree. And just to point out, I didn't just travel for a year. I did work as well in hospitality in New Zealand. So it was not that I was just on a holiday and just traveling from place to place all the time. So I did have some more consistent parts in my journey as well, where I was just working and that I had a bit of structure in my life. But by this point, where we were talking about now, that was not a very structured period of time. So yeah, but I know that burnout travel burnout term, and I must say I do agree. Um, but looking back, I'm happy that I experienced travel burnout because I've never experienced anything like a burnout here at home. But I think it's good too. I'm happy that I've had that experience so that I can, when I feel that again physically and mentally, I know that I should probably find my own way in how to deal with that. Probably take a bit more rest. Tell people at work in time that I should, well, probably work fewer hours and stuff. So
so
not all the fun experiences are bad on the long term.
I couldn't agree more, Matt. So before we sort of speak about just what your experience of coming home after travel and readjusting to life, I think one question I got asked a lot when I went traveling was, well, kind of where are you going to go? What are you going to do? How will you entertain yourself? And like, how will you afford it? And for me, as you sort of hinted at there, it was a combination of saving up for a long, long, long time
Yes.
before I went, and then doing a lot of volunteering work while I was out there, where I lived for weeks at a time with no outgoings. It was free. And I was working in
Yeah.
return for bed and board, and then obviously I did some paid work while I was out there as well, which didn't make me a rich man, but it put some money in the pot, enabled me to keep going a bit longer. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, if you would speak a little about that as well for you.
Yeah. Try to make smart choices. Try to I'd say don't plan everything too much or too tight, but if you're quite sure of a plan, um, well, try wherever you can, try to make a long-term plan financially as well, you know. For example, with my car, I could have rent one as well, but I knew that I wasn't about to do it for quite a while. So then it's better to buy one and then sell it later on. Not that you'll get any profit from it, but the loss is not as big as when you rent one for a couple of months, you know? So those kinds of things. And also, yeah, start working at some point, not only for the money, but also for the experiences, grow relationships over more time than just a friendship for a week or for a few days, you know? It's good to have that experience as well.
And Sjirk, for anyone listening, Sjirk's a very humble man, but he did so exceptionally well in his job working in a restaurant that they showered him with positive feedback, and I think they offered to sponsor you to stay in the country because they were such a
Thanks.
big fan of
Yes.
you.
Thank
You were
you.
such a
Yeah, that's
valuable
true.
member of the team. So shout out for you for that.
Thanks.
Credit where credit's due. I know you worked your socks off, and I think you went back and did a second stint there as well.
Yes,
So
I worked there, bought a car, and when I sold the car, I went back.
yeah, and thank you for driving me around
Yes.
hundreds of miles around New Zealand. We did have some awesome road trips, but I think some of our most juicy conversations have been about the return home and the challenges that we've both faced, different ones, similar ones, and how we've conquered them. I just would like to ask you, what's that experience been like, kind of returning to normal life, building your new life after having had this amazing around the world travel experience. Kind of what's it been like coming home again?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think um that for most people traveling must be a really hard point that you have to go through. And well, the struggles with coming home, because for me it was a struggle, are not are worth it. You know, you grow from that as well. You don't only grow from the positive things. Um, I think it might have taken me around 4 months to feel like I was back into some kind of a rhythm ish thing. Has taken quite a while. Um, it was tough, I must say. Um, I think I'm quite a social, outgoing guy, but I felt quite socially anxious at first as well. Like, what's the point that I'm gonna be at parties again? What's the point I'm gonna show up at my football club again? Because everyone's gonna see you for the first time in ages. How are they gonna react? Do I have to tell my story 100 times? You start to think about every place that you show up in the first 2 3 weeks, which is really weird. Especially if you've been away for like a year. It's probably different if you've been away for 2 months. Um, so that's been really tough. And then I returned home to my parents, where I grew up as well. Um, I've had a lot of times that I was like, "What the hell am I doing here?" You know, why am I not growing as much as I was in another country? It feels like you're back at where you came from and that you didn't grow in any way because you're back at where you started after such a journey. And you really need to take time and effort to tell yourself, maybe let other people tell you that you've grown despite the fact that you're back at where you started. Um, and that is really hard. Must have taken me 4 months at least. And then again, journaling really helped me to write down my struggles, um, and see how I would be able to cope with those struggles.
Thanks, Matt. So what's the best advice then you give to someone who is, either is already traveling or thinking of traveling and worried, concerned about the coming home bit at the end, or settling somewhere and staying in one place for a long time, and what advice would you give about facing and doing that?
Embrace it, accept it, and it's part of your growing journey. And it's see it as a new chapter to what's coming after your travels, and it doesn't mean that your travel journey has ended. In fact, my traveling has opened doors to travel more around my home place. Um, I start to do more small holiday trips, like leave the house with my bike for just like 3 or 4 days, just me, my bike, and a backpack, and just cycle somewhere, stay in an Airbnb, and explore some area 2 hours away from here. Um, just think about how you could keep your travel self going at the place where you come back to. Um, and see how you can apply the lessons that you've learned at this space where you are at this very moment. Um, and for me, journaling really helped, which will be uncomfortable and awkward at first, probably. But I would really advise people to do it and be patient, which is hard. I'm not a very patient person in that regard, but um, maybe
I,
I'd say some of those things.
I remember. Thanks, Matt. I remember you. There was a line you wrote in your journal. I wonder if you care to share it. When you came back and in a conversation we had, and it was kind of a realization you had about um, travel and what travel is, and but
Oh yes.
I wouldn't like to butcher
So
your
in a
words.
nutshell, it says you might not travel the world forever, but you can travel within yourself forever. Um, and I think that's the whole point of like traveling the world or traveling wherever you go. You cannot travel forever. Maybe some people can, but I don't have the money to travel forever. Um, at least
Or maybe
travel
the
to
obligation.
places forever.
Yeah.
You need to work at some point, make some money, and well, build something somewhere. Um, but traveling to places can expand your mind, give you new ideas, make you learn more about yourself. Um, and you can always do that wherever you are. Expand your mind and learn more about yourself.
I agree. And then someone said to me, no one can take away what you've seen and what you've done and the experiences you've had, even if you never set foot out of your village again for the rest of your life. No one can take that away from you. And
Exactly. I must say that is
yeah.
not the case for me. I would like to experience new things and meet
Oh,
new people like that. Especially meeting new people has really been a thing that I've come to enjoy much, much more. Um, so I really like that. And getting out of your comfort zone is one of those as well. I ended up getting a job which I didn't go to university for in the first place. Because I studied psychology and now I'm a teacher. But I was just like, I'll just go for it. We'll see what happens. And if I don't like it, it's been an experience, and then we'll go for something else. Well, I ended up liking it, and now I'm learning to get my teacher's degree as well. So, could have never expected that when I was in New Zealand to be at this point in my life right now. But it's been a lot of fun with its own challenges as well. But I start to embrace the challenges more and not see them as something very hard or very tough, but as something that you have to go through to, well, make a new step ahead.
thanks, man. And so, sort of to round off our conversation, like we right back at the beginning, even before we were recording, was saying the point of this podcast is to inspire people to step outside of their comfort zone, to take the path less traveled, and to go against the grain and do unconventional things and kind of follow their heart. If there's someone listening who's maybe thinking of, switching jobs, switching careers, or maybe just moving to live somewhere else and is kind of nervous about it, not sure if it's the right decision, and maybe just struggling. Is there anything, what would you sort of say to them or share with them?
Um, I'd probably ask them, what do you want? Don't take what if you don't have to take any opinion into consideration. What would you want? And then obviously you take other people's perspectives into consideration, but your own gut feeling is not lying. Um, so And if that means that you need to leave some things behind, that doesn't mean that it's not worth it. Um, if you wake up every day and you don't like your job, but it's the thing that you're used to, why not try something else? The things that you're used to are not to be there forever. Um, yeah, I definitely say try something new if you feel like you want to.
I love that, man, and lean into it. You know, from my whole travel was one of the biggest things I achieved. And if you go traveling and the only thing you achieve is to just kind of tune into your intuition, your gut feeling, your sixth sense, that little voice inside that is present, that maybe it's become almost muted over the years,
Yeah,
kind of to go and spend some time away on your own or meeting other people, doing something different, getting out of that routine, kind of when find yourself in autopilot. If the one thing you achieve through travel is tuning into that little voice inside, then
yeah,
it's completely worth it, because it has been
yeah,
for me.
absolutely. Yeah, I'd probably say, um, maybe that's a good piece of advice. Just try review your routine every now and then and see if it's your choice or if it's something that is kind of happening to you. If it's happening to you, that's probably not a good thing. But if you like your routine and it's your own choice, definitely keep going. But if you feel like you're a victim of your own routine, then you should probably do something else.
I love that, man. That's a fabulous note to end on. It's been an absolute pleasure having you, and no doubt we'll have you on the show again. If anyone's listening and they'd like to ask specific questions of you, or like to maybe reach out, get in touch, kind of how could they contact you? Where could they find you to get in touch, sort of social media wise?
Oh yeah, I've got Instagram. I'm not checking it daily, but every now and then, people could definitely reach out on there. Um, maybe you do you have a description or something to
We
put
can
my
stick it,
Instagram in?
we'll stick a link in the show notes
All
to
good.
your Instagram so people can follow you and reach out, and they can go and look at some fabulous pictures from New Zealand
Yes.
and Australia and
Ab-
Southeast Asia.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's been honestly, the time has flown by.
Absolutely.
You're such an inspiration. I so enjoy the conversations we have on a semi-regular basis. And 2 years down the line, it's like we're still, it's like we've not been apart really.
No,
So
which is
yeah,
really which is really special in my opinion.
I look forward to meeting up with you next year. Maybe we'll do a live in-person follow-up episode.
Even better.
So thanks for coming on, man. And I'll
Yeah, it's been an absolute honor to be guest in a podcast. I've never been guest in a podcast before. So I hope that you and anyone who's listening can do something with it. And if not, that's fine too. But it's been lovely to share some stories and hear your perspectives as well. So yeah, it's been a great pleasure.
no doubt. And our most humble guest so far, and our most outspoken
And
guest as
only
well.
guest. So
Only guest so
easy.
far. Thank you, man.
Thanks a lot, man.
The Solo Coach Podcast.